Tuesday, she's making coffee the way you like it. Wednesday, she's a little quieter than usual. Thursday, she says she's leaving, and by Friday, she's gone. From where you're standing, that's 3 days. That's the whole story. A 4-year relationship ends in a single conversation, and it feels less like a breakup and more like getting hit by a car you never saw coming. But people who study how relationships actually end have found something strange. The person who initiates a breakup usually isn't deciding in that moment. They've often been quietly leaning toward the exit for weeks, sometimes months, before they ever say a word about it out loud. So if the breakup felt instant to you, that's because you were only shown the very last scene of a much longer story. You weren't there for the part where the story actually changed. But that gap between when something actually shifts and when you're finally told about it is the reason breakups don't feel like an ending. They feel like an ambush. We're going to dig into exactly why that gap exists, why it shows up in almost every relationship that ends this way, and the one early signal most people don't know to watch for until it's already too late. But if you clicked on this because you just got blindsided by one of these, or because you're terrified you're standing in that gap right now and don't know it, I put together something built specifically to catch this early while you still have room to do something about it. It's called the Truth Detector. It's the first link in the description, and everything we're about to walk through is exactly why it works. Go grab it, then come back, because here's the explanation most people land on. Something just changed. Her feelings flipped overnight, like a switch. It's a clean explanation, but also rarely true. Think about a dam. A dam doesn't fail in an instant. The crack that ends up flooding a town starts as a hairline, years before anyone notices it. Water finds it. Pressure does its slow work. And for a long time, from the outside, the dam looks completely fine. Then one day, it isn't fine anymore, and everyone downstream calls it sudden. It wasn't sudden, it was just unnoticed. Relationships fail the same way, and once you know what you're looking at, you start to see the crack instead of just the flood. So if her feelings just changed overnight isn't really what happened, what is? In the 1980s, a sociologist named Diane Vaughan spent years interviewing people who'd gone through breakups and divorces, trying to map out what actually happens before a relationship ends. What she found reshaped how researchers think about this entirely. In most relationships that end, one person privately starts the process of leaving long before the other person finds out anything is wrong. Vaughan called this person the initiator, and she found that initiators typically go through a quiet, internal stage first, noticing what's missing, comparing the relationship to some other version of life they could be living, and slowly building a kind of parallel identity that doesn't include their partner. But here's the part that matters most. During this stage, the initiator usually doesn't look like someone who's leaving. They still go to dinner. They still say, "I love you." They still make the coffee the way you like it. The disengagement happens on the inside, while the outside stays exactly the same, because most people don't know how to announce, "I'm not sure about us," until they have already half answered the question for themselves. So, the partner on the other side, the one who eventually gets the news, isn't blind. They're just reading an accurate version of a relationship that's already become inaccurate. By the time you hear the words, the relationship didn't just end. It ended a while ago, and what you're hearing is the announcement, not the event. Think about a regular guy. Let's call him Mark. 3 years into a relationship that, by every visible measure, looks completely normal. They still text good morning. They still have plans for the weekend. Nothing about the last 6 weeks would make Mark suspicious of anything. Then one night she says, "I think we should talk." 20 minutes later, it's over. So Mark spends the next few weeks doing what almost everyone in his position does, replaying every conversation, looking for the moment it broke, and finding nothing because he's looking in the wrong place. He's searching the last 6 weeks for a crack that actually opened 8 months earlier, in a stage of the relationship he was never shown. If you asked Mark's partner, she could probably tell you the exact week things started feeling different to her, but Mark can't, because he was never in that version of the story. He was only ever in the version where everything stayed the same on the surface, right up until it didn't. And this is the part that makes breakups feel so disorienting. It's not that you missed something obvious, but the most important part of the story happened somewhere you didn't have access to. A communication researcher named Steve Duck took this further and broke the ending of a relationship down into 4 stages. And once you see them laid out, the whole "why did this feel so fast?" question stops being a mystery. Stage 1 is intrapsychic. This is entirely internal. One partner starts privately weighing whether the relationship is still worth it, usually without saying anything out loud. This stage can run for weeks or months. Stage 2 is dyadic. This is the first moment the other partner finds out anything is wrong, usually through a conversation that feels completely unprompted because as far as they knew, stage 1 was never happening. Stage 3 is social. Friends and family get told. The relationship starts ending in other people's eyes too, often before it's even fully ended between the couple. Stage 4 is what Duck called grave dressing. Both people start constructing the story of what happened and why, the version they'll tell themselves and other people afterward. But here's the part that should reframe everything. If you're the one who got left, you usually only experience one of these 4 stages directly. You walk straight into stage 2, with zero warning that stage 1 had already been running in the background for who knows how long. Now that's not a feeling problem, that's a timeline problem. You were handed a conversation that represented the second of 4 phases, and your brain tried to make sense of an entire relationship ending using a quarter of the information. No wonder it felt instant. You were only ever shown 1 frame of a 4-frame film. So if stage 1 is invisible, is there really nothing you can pick up on? Not nothing. There are small specific shifts that tend to show up while someone is quietly going through stage 1, long before they ever say anything. But they're easy to miss because none of them look dramatic on their own. A change in how questions get asked. She used to ask what's wrong. Now she just says it's fine before you've even asked. A change in how plans get made. Weekend plans start getting made later, looser, with more built-in outs. A change in how arguments get resolved, or stop getting resolved at all. A disagreement that used to turn into a real conversation just kind of dissolves now, and neither of you brings it back up. Individually, each one looks like nothing. A bad mood, a busy week. But together, they're the hairline crack in the dam. This is exactly the gap that decides how a breakup feels. And if you can read those small shifts while they're happening, you're not blindsided by stage 2 because you already knew stage 1 was underway. But if you can't, you experience the entire relationship ending in a single 20-minute conversation and spend the next 2 months trying to reconstruct 8 months of history you were never shown. This is the exact problem the truth detector was built to solve, and it does it faster than the way most people learn this, which is the hard way, after the fact, alone, replaying conversations at 2 a.m, looking for a crack they were never shown. It maps out exactly what stage 1 looks like from the outside, so you're not waiting for the announcement to find out the story already moved on without you. It's the first link in the description. Now look. It's tempting to hear all of this as proof that she was lying the whole time, but that's not quite it. And it's worth being precise here because the difference matters. Most people in stage 1 aren't running a con. They're avoiding a conversation they don't know how to start because saying, "I think I'm losing interest in us," out loud is one of the hardest sentences in the entire language, and most people would rather quietly drift away from a decision than confront it directly. That disengagement isn't deception, it's avoidance dressed up as normalcy, because normalcy is easier than honesty. That distinction actually matters because it changes what you're actually looking for. You're not hunting for a liar, you're watching for the early signs of someone quietly answering a question they haven't admitted they're asking yet. Now that's a completely different skill, and it's one you can actually build because it doesn't require catching someone in a lie. It just requires noticing the shift before the announcement does it for you. So let's put the whole thing back together. A breakup isn't actually fast. It only feels fast because you experience the relationship and its ending on completely different timelines than your partner does. They've been living in stage 1 for weeks or months. You're standing entirely in stage 2, hearing the conclusion of a process you were never invited to watch. The relationship didn't end on Thursday. It ended sometime earlier, quietly, while everything on the surface stayed exactly the same. Thursday was just the day someone finally said the sentence out loud. Once you see it this way, the whole experience stops feeling like an ambush and starts feeling like something closer to a translation problem. You weren't blindsided by reality. You were handed a summary instead of the full story, and your brain, reasonably, assumed the summary was the whole thing. But here's the part worth sitting with. If breakups are asymmetric by default, the only real fix isn't learning to recover faster after the fact. It's learning to read stage 1 while it's still happening, in real time, in whatever relationship you're in right now. That's a different skill than getting over someone. It's the skill of noticing the version of the story that isn't being said out loud yet, while there's still time for it to matter. Some people develop this by accident, after enough painful surprises to start recognizing the pattern. Other people would rather not learn it the expensive way. But the most disorienting part of any breakup usually isn't the loss itself. It's the feeling that you should have seen it coming and somehow didn't. But you were never given the chance to see it coming, because you were never shown the part of the story where it started. That's not a flaw in you. It's just how the timeline works for almost everyone, almost every time. And once you know that, the question stops being, why didn't I notice? It becomes, what would I notice next time if I knew what to look for? That's a much more useful question, and it's one you can actually answer. The truth detector is the first link below if you want the full breakdown of exactly what stage 1 looks like before anyone announces anything. See you in the next one.